Well, it's quite obvious for someone like you that understands politics that those people are coming from the opposition. Their job, in their opinion, is to fight whatever the government is doing. I think it's very anti-patriotic not to support Israel's war when we are fighting the most justified war in the world against a terror group that committed the worst atrocities at the 7th of October. Just today, we remember 600 days that we still have 58 hostages in captivity. And I'm afraid to say, nowadays in Israel, you can't find even one leader that will say he's willing to live with Hamas on its doorstep. So if those people have any criticism, they should offer a plan how Hamas will be removed from the Gaza Strip, from controlling the doorstep of Israel, not committing the 7th of October again. I didn't get to hear that, not from European leaders that are criticizing Israel, and not from those opposition former leaders. So I must say that in the end of the day, Israel has a serious threat on its security. You will agree with that. No one wants to see people being massacred in their homes like we've seen at the 7th of October. And in order to do that, the aims of the war are still relevant. We want to bring back our hostages, and we want to make sure Hamas won't control the Gaza Strip. Every leader in the world, in the Western world, agrees on those two aims. I think when you look at the facts, and you should look at the facts, letting in 25,000 trucks with tons of aid, this is not a policy of starvation. Now, let me tell you what was Israel's policy from the beginning of the war. From the beginning of the war, we created a very clear distinction between the terrorists. We're talking about 50,000 people that embedded themselves in population, as you know. Just now, you just mentioned Mohammed Sinwar. He was found under a hospital, under the European hospital. He was hiding there because he knows exactly how the world reacts when Israel attacks hospitals. But those hospitals being abused and being used as a terror facilities. This is why Israel is allowed to operate there. Now, I'm going back to the policy of aid. In the last few days, as you know, Israel is launching a new program, a new mechanism to deliver aid because, unfortunately, and I'm saying that with a big pain, Hamas was looting the aid that all the world wanted to be let into Gaza. Now, everyone is interested that the population won't be starving. We don't want to see pictures of children that don't have something to eat. We all share the same interest. But at the same time, if Hamas is looting the aid, then we are empowering the war machine. And according to the international law, no country in the world has obligation to feed the war machine of the enemy. And this is what happened in the last few months. This is why Israel had to change the mechanism. This is why American companies are involved. So we'll have a buffer. We won't have to see Israeli soldiers combating Hamas while they're trying to loot the aid. The whole procedure is much more effective. And just in the last few days, we saw Hamas putting barriers for the population not to receive this aid. This is the same Hamas that uses his own people as human shields. So we are talking about a situation that's very difficult, very complicated. Once Israel is fighting the Hamas terrorists, we still want aid to get in. And the mechanism, I believe, that Israel is putting now forward is so much better than the one that in the end of the day is empowering Hamas.
Takeaway. The key takeaway from this segment is the stark contrast between Piers Morgan's accusations of disproportionate Israeli military actions, including potential war crimes, and Ambassador Hotovely's defense of Israel's strategy as a necessary response to Hamas's actions. Morgan focuses on the humanitarian toll, particularly on children, and cites inflammatory statements from Israeli Minister Smotrich, while Hotovely insists Israel's goal is to eliminate Hamas, not harm civilians, and denies genocide allegations. Analysis. This segment highlights a heated exchange where Morgan adopts an aggressive, confrontational interviewing style, repeatedly pressing Hotovely on the blockade's humanitarian impact and Smotrich's statement suggesting ethnic cleansing. Morgan frames the blockade as a deliberate starvation policy, citing the high proportion of children in Gaza, and labels Smotrich's rhetoric as genocidal, though he acknowledges his reluctance to use the term lightly. Hotovely counters by emphasizing Israel's security imperatives, denying starvation policies, and blaming Hamas for looting aid and using civilians as shields. Her reference to 25,000 aid trucks aims to refute starvation claims, but she avoids directly addressing Smotrich's statements, instead distancing them from official government policy and invoking President Trump's plan to reframe the goal as improving Gaza by eliminating Hamas. The mention of Trump's plan is vague and seems to deflect from the genocide accusation. Hotovely's insistence that the war could end if Hamas surrenders underscores Israel's position but sidesteps Morgan's concerns about civilian casualties and proportionality. The exchange reveals a fundamental disconnect. Morgan focuses on moral and humanitarian consequences, while Hotovely prioritizes security and legal justifications under international law. Summary: Piers Morgan challenges Ambassador Zipi Hotovely on Israel's military strategy in Gaza, particularly the 3-month blockade, which he calls a war crime due to its impact on children. He cites Minister Smotrich's statements about displacing Palestinians as evidence of genocidal intent. Hotovely defends Israel, claiming 25,000 aid trucks prove there's no starvation policy, blames Hamas for looting aid and using human shields, and denies Smotrich's views reflect government policy. She insists the war aims to eliminate Hamas and secure the release of 58 hostages, suggesting the conflict could end if Hamas surrenders and Gaza is demilitarized. Conclusion: this segment encapsulates the polarized narrative surrounding the Israel-Gaza conflict. Morgan's focus on civilian suffering and inflammatory Israeli rhetoric highlights global concerns about proportionality and humanitarian law, while Hotovely's responses reflect Israel's prioritization of security and its framing of Hamas as the sole driver of the conflict's continuation. The lack of common ground, particularly on the issue of civilian casualties and Smotrich's statements, underscores the difficulty of reconciling humanitarian critiques with Israel's security-driven narrative. The exchange leaves unresolved questions about accountability for civilian deaths and the feasibility of a non-military resolution.